We were continuing, we were talking about the story of Prophet Yusuf in our last tafsir that I was doing, and we're going to be continuing, inshallah ta'ala. And where we left off was verse 23. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, until this point in Surah Yusuf, what happened, just to recap. So, Yusuf was a young boy, and he was growing up. Um, Let me set my timer for 30 minutes here. So Yusuf, as a young boy, he was growing up, and he saw this dream where he saw 12 stars, and he saw the sun and the moon, and they were all bowing down in front of him. So he went and told his father the dream that he had, and his father said, "Don't tell your brothers because they will be envious of you. They'll become jealous of you." And lo and behold, he went and told them anyways, because he's a kid. And what happened was they plotted against him. They took him out to go play somewhere. They left him with their stuff, and they actually picked him up and threw him in a well so that he could be kidnapped and sold into slavery. And this is what happened. So we left off here after Yusuf was already put into slavery, and he arrives in Egypt. So once he arrives in Egypt, he's completely missing from his family. He is a complete stranger. But even when he arrives in Egypt, he is purchased by a high-class society. He's purchased by basically the prime minister or the finance minister. We're not sure exactly which one. He's a very high minister in Egypt. So he's purchased, and he's going to be well taken care of. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has tested him with the difficulty, and through the difficulty he gets an ease, and then he gets another difficulty, and then through that he gets another type of ease. And that's the way life is, right? Difficulty, ease, difficulty, and ease, happening back and forth simultaneously, not simultaneously, one after another. So we left it off here, and now he's inside the house of this man who's known as Al-Aziz. Al-Aziz basically means somebody who is in a very high position, but according to the Bible, they give his name, or they give his title as Potiphar. I don't know how to pronounce it, but that's what it looks like. So now they're there. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in verse 23, وَرَاوَدَتْهُ الَّتِي هُوَ فِي بَيْتِهَا عَنْ نَفْسِهِ. And she, in whose house he was, tried to seduce him. Okay, so now what's happening is that he's inside the house of the finance minister or the prime minister, and the minister's wife is trying to seduce Prophet Yusuf, right? She's trying to get him because she's attracted to him. She's interested in him. So now he's in a good position. He's well taken care of. He's in a good household, but now he's being tempted. A different type of test that he's going through. وَغَلَّقَتِ الْأَبْوَابُ وَقَالَتْ هَيْتَ لَكَ. So she closed up all the doors when everyone was gone, and she says, come on. Basically, this is just understand the situation here. This is a woman who belongs to high-class society. Usually, somebody is that high and wealthy and powerful in society, the finance minister, right, Al-Aziz. What kind of wife would he usually get? Good looking or not so good looking? Good looking, because you're from the high class, you get a lot of options. Everyone is interested in you. So we're talking about a good looking woman, most likely, a powerful woman, because she's from high class society, a wealthy woman, right? Probably, definitely somebody who is has a good family status as well, good family, noble family within Egypt and all of that. So the four things that people usually look for in marriage, she probably has all four of them. The Prophet ﷺ, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said that people will look for four things in marriage. Make sure to look for deen. If you don't look for the religion, the deen, saribat yadak, you'll end up with nothing. But this is what people look for. They look for beauty, they look for wealth, they look for nobility, like honor and all of that stuff. So they look for these type of things. So she's pretty much got all of it. And now he's alone with her at home because he's the servant inside the house. Husband is probably busy doing his work. No one else is there. And she's extremely interested in him because he's a very good looking young man. So she's basically tempting him, seducing him, but she's not some random person who's seducing him. This is a woman who's got everything. Everything that a guy would normally want, she probably has it. So what happens? قَالَ مَعَاذَ اللَّهِ. He says, A'udhu billah, I seek refuge in Allah from this. So I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And then he explains, Innahu Rabbi ahsana mathwai. He says that my Lord has treated me very well. Right, so now here he's saying Rabbi, my Lord, in the sense that he's a slave. And Aziz, Al-Aziz, the minister, he is the owner of Yusuf because he's here in Egypt and he was sold into slavery. So he's saying, I don't want to do this, and understand the reason. The reason is what? Because your husband has been very good to me. He treats me very well. He put him in a very good position. He was always nice to him. So even though he's in slavery, he's one of those high-class slaves, well taken care of. And he says, now imagine, not only is it wrong, but what would I be doing if I was going to be, fooling around with the wife of the one that has been so good to me? This would be completely wrong. It would be even more wrong than if it was just a normal type of zina or something like that. So now it's worse. So he's giving an explanation. He says this would be wrong, and he says, "Innahu la yuflihu zalimun." He says the people who are unjust will not prosper. They will not be successful. So look at the statement that he's using. It's a vague statement. It's a statement that applies two ways. The first way is that who is being unjust here? So if he engages in a relationship with her, then he is being unjust because, number one, it's wrong. Number two, her husband, Aziz, has trusted. He's trusting Yusuf so much, but then he violates that trust. And this is the problem with cheating. The cheating that takes place in relationships, not only is it wrong intrinsically, but one of the problems with it is that you're violating the trust of somebody else. And this becomes a problem in and of itself. Now just look at, and the second part of it, the second problem with it, is that, or the second statement that he's making, the zalimun, who else are the zalimun here? If it's not him, who is he referring to? Her, because she's pressuring him. So he's basically making a statement saying, well, you can also be the zalim here because you're pressuring me to do this. You're tempting me. Your temptation of me is also zulm. It's injustice. You should not be tempting me because, this is not right. So you can be among those people. So he's saying basically the people who are unjust, the people who are zalimun, they will not be successful. Whether it's me or whether it's you, in both cases, there's going to be a problem. It's not going to achieve any benefit or results. So we look at it from that perspective. A few points we need to reflect upon. Right? The first one is that when we read the story of Prophet Yusuf and we see this verse, his life story is jumping very quickly. And sometimes it's very easy to assume that things just happen really fast. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving a very quick overview of his life. So immediately he just arrived in Egypt. And right when he arrives in Egypt, all of a sudden he quickly becomes a slave and he goes into this house and the person is taking good care of him. It seems like it's just been a few days. But we're not talking about a few days. And then it seems like all of a sudden, within a few days of his arriving at the house, all of a sudden he's being tempted. But this is not the case. Right? So he was a good-looking man. The Prophet ﷺ described him that he has half the beauty. He has half of all beauty. Right? Some scholars have said half of all beauty of mankind. Some said half of the beauty of Adam alayhi salam, because Adam was created directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Either way, he's a very good-looking young man. But it's not like he just entered into their house all of a sudden and this woman is just so attracted to him. All of a sudden, I absolutely need to sleep with this guy. Most likely what happened, because we don't have the time frame of how many years this is happening over. We just see Yusuf growing up, getting older, but the time frame is not mentioned. So what it means is that this happened over a long period of time. Over a long period of time, not only is he really good looking, he has good character. I mean, he's going to be a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the son of a messenger of Allah. So he has excellent character, he has good behavior, and what happens is that somebody, who sees such excellent behavior and they see his personal actions and how he behaves, she starts to fall in love with him over a long period of time. And just think about just think about women in general, okay? Men, maybe we can understand this, but women in general, especially in that kind of society, they don't just all of a sudden become so attracted physically to a person that they're trying to seduce you, right? Slowly, slowly, you throw out a little flirt thing over here, you give a little gift over here, you slowly try to reel the guy in, and eventually it gets to a point where she's so madly in love with him that now she's getting to a point where she's like, you're mine, I need, you need to be with me, right? Generally, it's the men who will jump straight to an action like this. Generally, women have more of an emotional connection. They will take things a little bit slower. They will kind of, reel the guy in. The reason why I'm mentioning that is because sometimes it looks like this was not a test for the test for Prophet Yusuf was just resisting having a physical relationship with her. Think about it from a longer time span. From a longer time span, Prophet Yusuf, this woman is in love with him. He's stuck alone with her on a regular basis, and she's constantly, constantly trying to flirt with him, trying to get trying to somehow get in touch with him, and uh, basically trying to lure him in, but very, very slowly. Which means that the test that he's going through, he's been going on for a very long time. It's not one test. It's not like all of a sudden one time she tried to seduce him. No, she's been doing this for a long period of time. And imagine what he's going through. He's thinking in the beginning, wow, she's being really nice. She's giving me gifts. She's doing this. And eventually it starts to get more and more. And that's very, very difficult for anybody, especially for a man, when a woman is being attracted and she's trying to slowly bring him in. And that's a very important lesson, number one, for us to be very careful about the steps that lead towards a situation like this. Oftentimes people, they just focus on, engaging in adultery or getting in a physical relationship with someone. We have to make sure we don't get to that level. But actually, you have to make sure that you stop the steps that lead towards that as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that in the Quran. وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا. He didn't say don't commit adultery. He said وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا means do not come near adultery, which means that there's certain steps that you take to get there. And we're not talking about physical steps. We're talking about the way in which you speak. We're talking about the way in which you look at each other. We're talking about all those things that eventually, slowly, slowly get you there. That should also be stopped. That should also be cut from the beginning. So that's one point. The other point is that Prophet Yusuf has been going through an ordeal for a long time. We're just getting the summary of how it got really, really bad. Right? The next point, we'll come to that. So, the next point is this. In our society today, what is the perspective? The perspective is that relationships by consent are all okay. As long as you have two consenting adults, that's a definition of relationship being okay. You have two consenting adults, there's no force and pressure taking place in the relationship, there's nothing immoral about it. There's nothing wrong about it. And that's where the whole idea of, gay relationships and the idea of everything falls in incestual relationships. This idea is extremely problematic because if you look at it from this perspective, if two people are married, or even one of them is married, and they both decide to consensually have a relationship, even though you're hiding it from somebody else, you're hiding it from the husband or from the wife, they're both agreeing to it. There's no force taking place. So how do you justify that adultery is wrong? Let alone fornication. Fornication means a relationship outside of marriage. Both people are not married. For adultery means one of them is married or both of them are married and there's still a relationship happening between them. So how do you justify rationally from a purely secular perspective that there's something wrong with this? It's difficult. The only way you could justify it is well, you're hiding, you're concealing this from your spouse. That's the only way. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He does not define relationships this way. It's not about consent. So if Prophet Yusuf consented and he said, okay, of my own free will, I'm not being pressured anymore. I'm doing this of my own free will. You're doing this of your own free will. We're two adults. Everything is fine. That's the conception of legitimate relationships in the society in which we live in. Islam does not bring that conception. Why? Because not only is adultery more problematic because you're cheating on a spouse, you are lying to a spouse who is assuming that you're not having a relationship with somebody else, number one. Number two, relationships outside of marriage or even within marriage with not from your spouse, what's going to happen? The possibility of having a child outside of wedlock, outside of the marriage, creates so many problems. Birth control, all that stuff doesn't always work, fails sometimes. So the problems that it results in illegitimate children. And now what ends up happening is, if you want to remain in the marriage, we have a situation I'm dealing with right now in the community. We have a situation like this. So what happens is, if somebody goes and cheats on another spouse and they have a child, but the married couple wants to remain together, who's going to take care of this child? Because the person who had engaged in adultery wants to pretend like they did not engage in adultery. So now if the people want to remain married, what's going to happen to this child? Is the child going to belong to this couple, or is it going to belong to this couple? Who's going to be financially responsible? This is a huge issue today, and it's always been an issue. And this is one of the other wisdoms behind why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited this. Anyways, let's move on. وَلَقَدْ هَمَّتْ بِهِ وَهَمَّ بِهَا لَوْلَا أَن رَأَى بُرْهَانَ رَبِّهِ. And it says, and she certainly was interested in him. She was after him, and he would have been after her had he not seen the clear evidence of his Lord. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that she really wanted him. And then he says, and he would have wanted her if there was not some evidence that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent. So what does this mean? It's referring to something happened. We don't know exactly what happened, but somehow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala interfered in the heart of Prophet Yusuf, and He protected him from even desiring her. So this is something that the prophets of Allah who are sent, they're always protected. They're always protected by Allah, because if they're not protected, they're not going to be role models. And if they're not role models, then what's going to happen? You're going to end up with a bunch of stories of these are the people whom Allah chose, and they're doing all sorts of horrible things. And unfortunately, this is what you find when you look at the Bible. You will find this, and we're going to get to the biblical verses on this. You'll find that prophets are doing really bad things. And from an Islamic perspective, this is not okay. This is not, the stuff that's being said about Prophet Nuh, the stuff that's being said about Prophet Lut, absolutely horrible things that are being said there. We don't accept that in Islam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intervened and stopped. So even Prophet Yusuf, he's saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, if we did not somehow intervene and he was stuck in the situation, he might have even been inclined towards her, because she has everything that a guy wants. Now, being inclined doesn't mean that he would have done it, but it means that his attraction, his fitna would have been even more difficult. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala somehow protected him and made his situation easier for him. And this is what's being said. كَذَلِكَ لِنَصْرِفَ عَنْهُ السُّوءَ وَالْفَحْشَاءَ. And that is how we turn people away from evil and indecency. See, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps people in their situation. When you have taqwa, when you fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you're conscious of Allah, وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. Whoever is conscious of Allah, whoever is mindful of Allah, Allah grants them a way out. So this concept is extremely important. It says, إِنَّهُ مِنْ عِبَادِنَا الْمُخْلَصِينَ. Indeed, he is one of our sincere servants. So Allah is testifying on behalf of Prophet Yusuf. We're there, we're protecting him. He is a good person. We're not going to allow him to get stuck in this. And that's really the key, is that when you become a true servant of Allah, Allah is going to take care of you. Allah is going to protect you. If you are not, you're doing all sorts of other things, it's easier to get stuck in a situation like this. So we should be very careful about this. So this idea says, you know what? If it wasn't for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala coming and intervening in some capacity, he would have also been inclined. So the idea probably crossed his mind. You know what? We all get whispers. We all get waswasa. We all whisper a little bit and we're thinking, you know what? No one's going to find out about this. No one's going to know. People make mistakes. The whispers come, but the important thing is to get out of that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help you when you take the right steps. Next verse. وَاسْتَبَقَ الْبَابَ وَقَدَّتْ قَمِيصَهُ مِن دُبُرٍ وَأَلْفَ يَا سَيِّدَهَا لَدَى الْبَابِ. Then it goes to a scene. A scene jumps. And they both ran towards the door, and she ripped his shirt from behind. And they met her husband at the door. So basically, imagine all of this is going on. She's in love with him. She's trying to seduce him. She's trying to attract him. Now one scene happens. Finally, at one point, she's basically going after him completely. And what does he do? They both run. He tries to run away towards the door to get out. Because what did she do? وَغَلَّقَتِ الْأَبْوَابِ. Right? غَلَقَ means to close. What does غَلَّقَ mean? Those who know Arabic. What's the difference? What's that? They closed it? No, غَلَقَ means to close anyways. What's the difference when you put the shadda? There you go. There's ta'keed, so it must be many doors. There's a lot of doors and they're closed in a non-normal way. Right? It's like completely sealed. So now what is he doing? He's like, I'm trapped, I'm stuck, how am I going to get out of here? Eventually he realized it's too much temptation and she's really trying to get to him physically. So he runs for it and he's going to say, somehow I need to get out of here, right? So he tries to run, and what does she do? She grabs his shirt and she's trying to get him not to run away, and the shirt rips. And what happens? As soon as they get to the door, right at that moment, who opens the door? Husband is walking in. Like right at the perfect timing, and he sees what's going on. So what does she say? She's very intelligent. Right? She's a smart woman. The moment she switches all of a sudden, قالت ما جزاء من أراد بأهلك سوءا إلا أن يسجن أو عذاب أليم. She says, what's the punishment of somebody who intended evil for your wife except being in prison or some type of punishment? Right? So basically she's like, this guy's trying to seduce me. Are you going to allow this to happen? What kind of husband are you? Aren't you going to do something to him? So now she's basically emotionally blackmailing him to make herself look like she's the victim. And this is extremely common. There's a science, a victimology, of how people try to play the victim when they're actually the ones who caused the problem. And it's very common today. You find it all the time. People, if you show tears, you show like you're the one who's been oppressed, you're the one who's been wrong, and you put the blame on somebody else. And for a lot of people, what will they do? A lot of people, they'll feel sorry for you, and they think, oh no, this person, they've been oppressed, they've been wronged, they've been taken advantage of by this other person. Usually it's a guy, and because girls will more likely tend to play the victim because of, I think you understand why, social status and the way that it works and everything. So they did that. Now look at what's going on here. This is not the first person in the story that's crying. Who else cried before? His brothers. So you see, there's a theme here. There's a theme taking place. She's crying to make him look like he's the bad guy. The brothers also cried to make them look like they're the victim. So she's trying to play the victim. The brothers were trying to play the victim. We lost the brother. It's not our fault. You know what? We're so sad. You see the common theme. There's another theme here. What did she grab? His shirt. Have we seen the shirt before? Where was the shirt? Brothers gave the shirt dipped in fake blood to show that, hey, look, there's a shirt. Okay? So we're going to see these themes of playing the victim and the shirt throughout the surah. It's very interesting because when you study, English literature, you go to your English class or something, they teach you how to look at, oh, well, why does the color green keep coming here in, I forgot, The Great Gatsby. I think there's a color green which keeps coming up again and again. The car is green and the money is green and this is green, and somehow that represents money. So that type of theme, people put that in their books, and it's done for a reason. And we'll look at the detailed reason, but just follow along. So what happens here is now she's going and playing the victim, and she's trying to say, look, he tried to seduce me, and look what a bad man he is, and this and that. But what does she not say? She does not say he should be put to death, because normally in those days, you do something like this, you're put to death. But she's not saying that. Why doesn't she want him put to death? She loves him. That's it. So she doesn't want him to be killed. So what happens? What happens is, it continues, قال هي راودتني عن نفسي. So Prophet Yusuf, he's not sitting there quiet. He responds. He says, she actually tried to seduce me against my own desire. She was the one going after me, and he's giving his side of the story. So, and the Aziz is listening. So at least he gets to speak and he gets to say something. وَشَهِدَ شَاهِدٌ مِّنْ أَهْلِهَا إِنْ كَانَ قَمِيصُهُ قُدَّ مِنْ قُبُلٍ فَصَدَقَتْ وَهُوَ مِنَ الْكَاذِبِينَ. So somebody from her own family speaks up. A witness speaks up and says, you know what? If his shirt is torn from the front, then she's speaking the truth, and he's a liar. So he basically, here's what's happening. Somehow they need to figure out what happened. So the man himself, he goes and consults everyone else. So what should we do? This is a huge problem. Not only is it a problem, number one, in his own family, like for himself, he's a minister. This is known as a political scandal, right? Anytime you have a high-level figure and there's been something going on in their family, now it becomes a problem for the entire state. It's a political problem as well. So this can potentially become a scandal. So he consults with everyone, and what do they say? Someone from her side of the family says, well, you know what? Here's what we can do. Check the shirt. And if the shirt is ripped from the front, what does that mean? It means that he was the one who was in front. She was trying to run away and she grabbed it. But if it's the other way around, وَإِن كَانَ قَمِيصُهُ قُدَّ مِن دُبُرٍ فَكَذَبَتْ وَهُوَ مِنَ الصَّادِقِينَ. But if his shirt is torn from behind, then she's lying and he's telling the truth. Why? Because he's saying, I tried to run away and she went after me. So she grabbed him from the back. If the shirt is ripped from the back, you'll be able to figure it out. So what's happening, number one, is this idea is coming from her own family. Which means what? Which means that her family member is not siding with her automatically. And this is a big problem. In many societies, what happens? Every time there's a problem, the family will side with the family. They will not side towards the truth. And they'll become among the zalimin, right? As Prophet Yusuf said, the zalimun will not be successful. The unjust people will not be successful. So he's saying that actually there's someone there in the family. Someone along came and said, you know what? We need to figure out if it's the truth. We need to utilize this means of investigation to find out if something is wrong. This is a very common problem. We have breakdown of many family relationships. We have a breakdown of relationships, husband and wife. We have a breakdown of family relationships, problems between parents and their children. We have a breakdown sometimes between brothers, between sisters. They don't want to talk to each other. We have a breakdown between an uncle and somebody else. And what needs to happen is whenever something like this is happening, we have to understand the most important thing is to be just. Not to side with your family, because that is injustice. If you side with your family only, or you side with the person who is closest to you in the family, you're among the zalimin. You're among the unjust people. Instead, you need to be calm, you need to be balanced, and you need to investigate the issue. If you have, just like this person is doing, see, we need to investigate and find out what is happening. We need to hear both sides of the story. So what happened? Al-Aziz, he's getting both sides of the story. His wife is saying one thing, Yusuf is saying another thing. Okay, we need to come up with some way to figure out which one is most likely the telling the truth, which one is most likely lying. They come up with a test. This is not a genius test, right? This is not some amazing complex thing, but they need some type of external evidence because you don't know whose word to take many times. Anytime there's a breakup, there's a problem, there's a family, you need to weigh both sides and you need to figure out some litmus test to figure out who is telling the truth and who is lying. Right? So that's one. So they try to figure out who it is. Now, let's look at the Bible before we move on to the rest of the story. So what does the Bible say here? This is from Genesis chapter 39. And then we'll end here. So the Bible says that Joseph, Prophet Yusuf, he was well built, he was handsome, right? And the master's wife started seducing him and saying, "Come to bed with me," and all of that. And then it goes to this part of the story and it says, she caught him by his cloak, his shirt, his garment, and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. Okay. You see the difference in the story? He just left it and he ran out of the house and he's gone. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called her household servants and she said, "Look, this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us, to play with us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. And when he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and he ran out of the house." This is what the Bible is saying. So you see a big difference in the narrative here. Now it says, she kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. Then she told him this story. "That Hebrew slave that you bought, he tried to make a sport of me, but as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and he ran out of the house." See the difference in the story? The difference in the story is that he was trying to do something and he already had his shirt off. And when she started screaming, he dropped the shirt and he ran out. This whole idea of ripping the shirt and running towards the door and all that, it's missing. Now you may think, you know what? This is so minor. This is very minor. What's the big deal? This is not a big difference between the Quran and the Bible. When I started this series, if you remember, I mentioned the statement of Allama ibn Kathir. Imam Ibn Kathir gives the criteria of when the Quran and the Bible overlap, most likely what is in the Bible is correct. When the Quran and the Bible contradict, we know this is something that's been changed in the Bible. When they neither overlap, when there's no contradiction and there's no overlap, what is the attitude that Muslims should take? Do you remember what I said? What? Maybe right, maybe wrong, but what was the suggestion? Take it with a grain of salt. I said, be careful when you're taking it. It could be right, it could be historical, but you have to be careful. Why do you have to be careful? Because these little details, little tiny details, you say, it's not a big deal. But if you research it more, if you look into it more, it becomes a big deal. Here it's clear contradiction, but still you have to be careful. So always keep that in mind. So what does it say here? When his master heard the story, his wife told him that this is how your slave treated me. The master burned with anger. Aziz, according to the Bible, Al-Aziz, he's fuming, he's burning with anger. This is not what the Quran is saying. And then what happened? Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. Is that what is being said? No. It's not what's being said. So I haven't gotten to the next verse, but you're going to find out the next verse contradicts this directly. The Aziz does not do that. And in fact, he says, you know what? You are the one who's lying. Very different narrative than what's over here. Okay, so it's important to keep this in mind because you will encounter people, very few people who know the story of Joseph from the Bible, but you'll encounter people who know that, and you will encounter books of Tafsir that mention certain aspects of the Bible, and you have a good video series produced by Iran recently. My father has been watching this series. It's really nice. It's about Prophet Yusuf. Very well enacted and everything like that, but here's what happens. Sometimes that when people are making these movies, what they're going to do is they're going to rely on data and information that's coming from the Bible as well as from the Quran, and sometimes they will skip because they're not scholars. They don't always get it checked. So they will skip a few details and they'll put some details from the Bible that are actually contradicting a little part, even a small part of what's in the Quran, and it'll give people the wrong impression. And if you watch one of those movies, and they're good movies, very good lessons, very nice, but you may get a few things here and there which are not correct, and they need to be clarified. You can go back and you can get them corrected, right? People are producing movies in Hollywood about 10 Commandments, the old movie, the new one that came out, the Disney movie, what's it called, like The Prince or something like that, about Prince of Egypt, made by Disney. Children watch that movie, and then they think things about Prophet Musa, which is coming from the Bible, and some of those things are in direct contradiction with the Quran, but you don't recognize it. You say, it's such a good movie, it's a cartoon, what's wrong with it? It's going to cause a problem. There should not be any misinformation that takes place. The Prophet Noah movie that they came out with, same issue. So much misinformation. How many Muslims watched it, and how many people get affected by it? So even these little things, we should be very cautious in understanding where there's real overlap and where there's contradiction. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase us in our knowledge, increase us in our wisdom, in our understanding. Ameen. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Nastaghfiruka Allah wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question? Yeah. Yeah. Because why do we look at the Bible? The Bible is like a historical document. So Quran doesn't mention what the situation was like in Egypt. It doesn't mention what type of buildings there were. It doesn't mention what the setup was like. So what do? We go to history, right? We go to history books and say, what did ancient Egypt look like around that time? So we get a better picture of what's going on. The Bible is just a historical document for us, like any other historical documents. It's like you find something in archaeology and you discover something and you say, oh, look, they used to use these type of pots or these type of buildings they used to build. It falls in the same category in terms of its authenticity. But we know that there's also aspects of it that are definitely originally from the original message of Prophet Isa. So that's why we go there for the details, the historical details that help us get a better picture of the story. True, but here's the thing. Let's say you wanted to make a movie like Prophet Yusuf. Okay, you want to make a movie about Prophet Yusuf. From the Quranic narrative, what are you going to get? A 10-minute movie? You have no details. You don't even know what anything's going to look like. So you have to get something that's historical. And most of the history on the details of this incident is going to be coming from Jewish and Christian sources, which is the Bible. That's why if we need some data, even if it's not 100%, we need to go to some source. Otherwise, we don't have anything. So it's like something is better than nothing as long as it's not contradicting. That's why. Yes. Next week, next time we're going to get into it. Yeah. So his question was, if Aziz said that she's at fault, why did Prophet Yusuf go to jail? So we'll see it next week, inshallah. It's coming in the next few verses. Inshallah. Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.